Jeff Cederstrom to come on up and talk about his company's experience with Protected Flow.
Okay, so thanks, Mike. I'm going to spend a few minutes and share our experience with Protected Flow. Again, my name is Jeff Cederstrom. I'm the president of the cutting tool division of Arch Global Precision. I have responsibility for 7 business units that manufacture cutting tools. So when I talk about cutting tools, think about the business end of a CNC mill. We make the carbide tools that go into the machine that machines out the parts. So all 7 companies make cutting tools, various shapes and sizes. I've been in manufacturing most of my career, and what I would say is I've been in very few locations that I would say planning and scheduling is a strength. And the business units within Arch Cutting Tools Group is no exception. It's definitely not a strength. Each of the business units are profitable. We've got customers that rely on us and love us and have been with us for many years. And so the businesses are good and healthy, but planning and scheduling is still not a strength. We decided at the highest level in the company that we were going to implement a standard ERP platform, and we were about halfway through that with Sightline 9, and Cutting Tools was on the kind of the bleeding edge of that. And that next quote that you see on there is the politically correct version of that statement, is that we had some scars trying to use the scheduling systems that were given to us in the ERP system. Now, having said that, the plant that I'm going to talk about, the business unit I'm going to talk about, they had their own way of scheduling. It was called the Rainbow system, and they used Foreman and this Rainbow prioritization system. We had been evolving into more of a work center, empowered work group type of a leadership in the plant. So we had evolved to a different scheduling system, and then we were trying this one on for size, and we're having a real hard time, the one that came with the package. And again, this is the politically correct version of saying that. So, what I would say is the plant I'm going to talk about, Ultradex, that has the experience with Protected Flow, had what I would call controlled chaos until December. So in full disclosure, we only have, essentially 3 months plus of using this tool. So it's a very limited experience, and I'm going to go on to tell you that we implemented it in a pretty rough time frame as well. So Mike came to one of my leadership team meetings and presented Protected Flow, and I had all my manufacturing leaders in the room, and they were all very excited about what they heard. But then when we have break, we hear comments like that second bullet, like, we've heard this before, we've seen this before, and isn't it true that we were supposed to have a version of something like this in our existing ERP system? So you kind of get this doubt that comes out, even though Mike did a good job of explaining to my leaders exactly as he explained to the rest of us, and we kind of walked out of there excited. But then the reality and the doubt sets in to some degree afterwards. And Mike he had a slide or two on this topic, and I can't emphasize this enough: the importance of change management when you're working on implementing a process like this, because as I mentioned, I'm a manufacturing person, and all the folks that Mike presented to in my group are all manufacturing folks, and they're very proud. Mike wasn't there. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand this business. I've been here for 20 years, 30 years, and so we're very proud. We all know what we're doing through this intuition and experience. And here comes a new tool and someone we don't know that's trying to help us do our jobs better. So I can't emphasize the importance of change management, having strong IT support. Ideally, you've got strong leader support. That sometimes ebbs and flows a little bit depending on the day. But I wanted to make that point extremely clear. And then the next bullet really kind of epitomizes a point that Mike was making as it applies to change management and the trust. I had support all the way down to the foreman, but we took it out on the shop floor, and all of a sudden this looks different. And so I was told to do this, and I'm going to follow it. However, when the foreman wasn't there, the operations folks, caring as much as they do, they start looking behind the scenes and pulling the curtain back, and they start checking for themselves whether this makes sense. And what you see on here was an early quote from what I'll call an opinion leader, very highly skilled operator in our milling department. that says, hey, I looked into a couple of these jobs and I had no idea. I look at the due date every day, but I had no idea that this particular job that just boomeranged back to me has 2 external operations that we have not been accounting for. We were just looking at the end due date and we were putting it off, but it's got to go outside the plant 2 times. So at the end of the day, it wasn't me, it wasn't the general manager, it wasn't the foreman that helped the folks on the floor understand that this tool worked. They went and they proved it themselves by pulling back the curtain and looking at a job or 2. So that was a bit of an inflection point, and we started to get some momentum, again, in a relatively short amount of time here. And this next, I made the comment about us implementing protected flow at a really bad period of time, and we insult tested this. One thing I forgot to mention is that the plant I'm talking about was growing, and its on-time delivery was slipping quite a bit, so we needed to do something different. And so I wasn't going to wait for a great time of the year, and what happened is this got implemented in the beginning of December, which is right after Thanksgiving and a statewide holiday we call deer hunting in Michigan. So we were behind, and then it got implemented in December, and we had more holidays. We got farther behind. We took a 2-day outage to do inventory count, put us more behind, and we had to update some numbers and protected flow as a result of that. So when I say insult tested, we insult tested it. Came back after the first of the year, and the plant manager pulled me aside and said, hey, just so you know, with the new tool that we're working on here, we're over 100 jobs behind, and they're at least 2 to 3 weeks behind. But don't worry, this is not Protected Flow's fault, because this is this way every year when we come around. So I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just letting you know where we stand. And so we insult tested this, and we stuck to it, and we told everyone that the only way this is going to work is if you follow it and don't try to outthink it. Don't try to use your intuition. Please try to follow the way it's set up. We had quotes like the one that's up there. This is not the job I would pick. I've been here 20 years. I would never do it this way, but we're going to trust it. Because I showed you the slide before where they went and they checked on it and they believed in it. And then we kind of had a turning point in the beginning of January where there was a handful of customers that were really screaming, and we started to do what we normally do. We take those jobs out into the plant, management does, and we start walking around and say, see this? And the folks on the floor knew that if we started to make changes around the schedule that we had established, they knew that it was kind of garbage in, garbage out, and all of a sudden that was going to degrade. And to their credit, this was the turning point, the operations folks said, all right, time out. Are we going to do it this way, or are we going to do it the old way? Because we can't do it both. And that was a turning point for us, and so the trust continued, and it moved forward, and we figured out a way to get those jobs put into the schedule so that they were in there, as opposed to going around the schedule on the shop floor using those type of communication skills, if you will. We also, and I didn't mention this, Ultradex is a make-to-stock and a make-to-order plan. And one of the benefits that we're seeing is that in addition to the timing that Mike talked about for the jobs, we have now clear priority between the make-to-order and the make-to-stock. And so this clearly lays out the priority not of just the date that we've told the customer, but also between the make-to-order and the make-to-stock. It's all built in there. So I'm not saying that Ultradex is the most complex business unit in the world, but we have shared people and shared machine resources to make the order and to make the stock. So decisions do need to be made. Okay, go ahead. This is the last slide. So results so far, I mentioned that we came back January 1st, we were 100 jobs behind, and they were 2 or 3 weeks behind. I checked back in with Mike Tipton, who is our foreman, and has taken the lead on the scheduling part of all of Ultradex, and the end of January we were approximately 40 jobs overdue. But he said, you know, that seems like a big deal, but what's a bigger deal to me, he said, is that instead of 2 or 3 weeks behind, they're more like, you know, 3 or 4 days behind. And then I checked in with him right before I came here at the end of last week, and you know, we were 14 jobs behind, and they were 1 or 2 days behind. And his quote was, "I haven't seen us this caught up with the make to order since I've been here." Now we're getting a lot more orders in, so if we check maybe next week, it may not be you know, quite as good because we were taking on more orders. We're a growing business unit, but that's a pretty big statement for someone who's been around there for a while to make that comment. And so, you know, I can't claim a lot of the hard facts because it's been too early. We have an opportunity to move our lead times from 8 to 10 weeks, potentially down to where we had been at one time, 6 to 8. We haven't done that yet, but it's being entertained and discussed right now. We're talking about taking overtime down and reducing costs that way. We are working to get our make-to-stock quantities from a 6-month quantity down to a 4-month quantity because we feel that we're more nimble now and can come back around on the schedule more easily than we had in the past. So we're taking a little bit of risk there, but we're working it down on the make-to-stock side. And it provides a foundation for ongoing improvement. I had talked to the plant a number of times about bringing in some lean resources to optimize various bottlenecks in the plant, but quite frankly, if you're not working on the right jobs at the right time, it's kind of a futile activity. So you can increase your capacity in what looks like a bottleneck, but if it's really not a bottleneck, and, you know, if you schedule the jobs right, it doesn't make sense. And I kind of skipped over one, this comment here, we don't kick all the jobs at once like we issued. That's another quote that came out of the plant. Putting jobs out to the shop floor before they need to be put out there, it essentially burns up machine time prematurely. You utilize capacity before it needs to be used by putting all the jobs out on the shop floor at once. And so the way a lot of plants that I've worked in, including Ultradex, works is that they would kick these jobs as soon as they got off the engineer's desk, and they would be staring at 50, 60, 70 jobs, and what they would do is they would look at the due date, and they would look at how they were set up, and they would pick the jobs and they would batch them and group them that way. And now we only kick a certain number of jobs. So there are only, say, 20 jobs that are seen on the schedule, and the folks that are in the plant have the opportunity to optimize the setup on the jobs that are there, not a list of 60, 70, 80 jobs that they can batch from a setup standpoint. You can do it within a smaller group so that we're honoring the due date as much or more than the setup. This concept of we're running it through the plant efficiency, but so, you know, we have things that are done early. If they're not ready, we just wasted time manufacturing them and getting them ready ahead of time before they needed to be. So back to this foundation for improvement that I was talking about. Now that we have a little bit better picture of where the actual bottlenecks are, we can go in and spend some more time optimizing and debottlenecking the